Hey everyone, I recently released a video on my top 3 applications to use if you're starting a YouTube channel, and among them was Davinci Resolve. Well, since the start of 2024, I've opted to use Davinci Resolve full-time in replacement of my incredibly expensive Adobe Creative Cloud subscription, and for 2 reasons: price and reliability. Now today for you I have a guide on how to use Davinci Resolve and some of the features of Davinci Resolve Studio, the one-time payment version of Resolve. And also a massive thank you to Blackmagic for providing me with a key to Resolve Studio. It's great to see a company as big as yours supporting small creators such as myself. Please make use of the chapters below and let's get into it. Now you will find out pretty quickly whether or not you need the Studio version, because you will occasionally run into a pop-up that will tell you that you need the Studio version to use the specific feature. If there is anything missing from your menus in today's video, that's because it's only present in the Studio version of the application. So if you find that particular feature useful or something that you want to use in your videos, that's the reason why. But there is good news. If you do choose to get Davinci Resolve Studio, it is only a one-time fee. In Australia, that is $495, but that's not a subscription. That's half the price of an annual subscription of something like Adobe Creative Cloud. So in front of me we have Davinci Resolve Studio 18.6 open, and I have a library that I've created called YouTube. You can call your library whatever you want, and it's up to you as to whether or not you want to have multiple libraries or just one. Maybe you want one for YouTube, maybe you want one for client work. Now the first thing you're going to want to do is import your media, right? And there's a few different ways of being able to do that, but down the bottom here we're going to head over to the Media tab. Where we just were a moment ago was something called the Cut tab, and that is an editing tab which is similar to something like Final Cut Pro. I don't actually use that, I use one tab along. It's called the Edit tab, and it's probably what most of you are more familiar with. It's similar to something like Premiere, for example. Now, if I was to go in and drag in one piece of media, in this case we'll be using footage from a zoo trip that I took recently with my family to Taronga Zoo. We stayed overnight, it was awesome. You'll see that if I was to drag something like that straight on to the timeline, it would say, do you want to change the project frame rate? Now this is particularly handy if you're not really sure what the project frame rate is. It can adjust all of that for you. But before you even import your first bit of video, I strongly suggest that you go into project settings. To do that, there's an easy way of doing it. You can either hit Shift 9 on your keyboard if you're a Windows user, or alternatively, you can just hit the cog in the bottom right-hand corner over here. Now, all of my footage is captured over 2 different cameras. One is the Canon R7 that you saw me on earlier, and another one is the Pixel 8 Pro. But both of them were shot in 4K, and both of them were shot in 60 frames per second. That was deliberate. I knew I was going to make a video on this. You can work with multiple frame rates, but it's easier to work with just the one. You could also potentially work with this in 4K and then downscale it to 1080p, and the footage would inevitably look better that way than if it was just straight 1080p. I would really encourage you to go into these project settings though. So what we're looking at now is a timeline resolution of 4K, in this case 3840 by 2160. You can change the timeline resolution to anything that you want. Just remember to change it back before you do the export. Working with 4K footage but then creating a 1080p timeline can help alleviate some stress on your computer. And speaking of my computer, we're looking at an RTX 4060 in my Legion Slim 5. It's more than enough to be able to handle Davinci, but just letting you know that's what I'm using, that's what we'll be editing with today. Now my time rate is at 60 frames per second. You can see here that there are ways to be able to change that. I am setting it to 59.94 because that's actually what it is, but you know, it's 60 frames. Scrolling a little further down, you can see a section here called Optimize Media and Render Cache. Now, if you're coming from something like Premiere, I would think of this more like proxies. Davinci used a term called optimized media for a long time. It's still present within Davinci Resolve and Resolve Studio, but I wouldn't really worry about that too much. I imagine at some point they're going to get rid of the term optimized media and just stick with proxies. What we want to do is change that from whatever the default that it was set to for you, probably H.264. So there's a good chance you're working with H.264 or H.26 files most of the time. These are great for viewing, but not so great for editing. So what we want to do is change it to something like DNxHRSQ. I've done this previously with optimized media, but as I said, we're not using optimized media. We're going to be just using proxies for the duration of this video. For the proxy media resolution, you could change this. I'm going to leave it on choose automatically. Now just also be aware that if you are working with Proxy media, it does have a tendency of filling up your hard drive really quickly. My C drive is quite small, my D drive is much larger. So going over here and changing the location of those files is probably necessary, especially if you have a smaller hard drive or have multiple hard drives. So I've just moved my Proxy media all into one spot, my cache clips and my galleries and so on. So that's all we're doing for this section here. Now, one last thing you might want to do is save these presets so you don't have to change it every single time Davinci opens. To do that, we're going to hit these three dots in the top right-hand corner and then go ahead there and save the current settings as a preset if it's your first time. If it's not, I have one already and I'm simply going to update that preset like so, and that's saved now every single time I come back into Davinci. That's it for project settings for the moment. We're going to leave that for now. Now, if you do have Davinci Resolve Studio, there is one cool feature that exists within the preferences. If we go up to File and then Preferences, we can see here under Memory and GPU that we have a few different options in relation to what graphics card you're using. You can leave it set to auto for both, but I've found a bit of a performance boost by manually selecting it. I don't know if that's true or not, it's just the way that it feels. So I've manually selected my RTX 4060. We also have here used neural engine optimization on NVIDIA. Now, the first time you load up Davinci Resolve Studio, it will ask you to run this. It takes quite some time, but once it's done, that will help with some of the other more advanced features that are going on under the hood in Davinci Resolve Studio, so it's worth doing. But that's all we're looking at for there. We're now going to jump over to the user section here and under Project, Save and Load. So one thing that kept happening in Premiere all the time was it crashed. It crashed constantly. It was frustrating and I would lose a lot of stuff. So it didn't matter how often I was setting up the backup interval, I'd still lose things. There are live saves, there are project backups. Davinci is constantly backing everything up. I've opted to change the location of where those backups are onto my larger hard drive, and you can do the same. But I strongly suggest that you have live save and timeline backups turned on, and then you can change it to how often you like. There is one other quick feature that's kind of cool in the system settings. If you head down to internet accounts, you can see here that you can sign in directly to YouTube. So what you could do is that you could sign into your YouTube account, and then once the video has finished rendering at the end, it just imports it straight onto YouTube, set as private, unlisted. You could even go live if you really wanted to. And the last thing you might want to do is head over to the editing tab here. By default, when you come into Davinci Resolve for the first time, the time code starts at an hour in, I believe. So if you want to work from the beginning, 0, then just make sure you've got it here as so. And finally, putting this thing together, we're working with two separate cameras. A little bit of footage from the Canon R7, but primarily from the Pixel 8 Pro. We're looking at this footage here from Taronga Zoo Stay in Sydney, and it's not in any kind of order. Now, I want to tell my story sequentially today. When you're making a video, you may not want to, but for the purposes of today, that's what I want to do. And there are a few different ways of being able to organize this. As it stands right now, nothing has been imported in. One way of being able to do that is that you can go ahead and find your file structure on the left there, right click and do add folder and subfolders into the media pool, create bins. We're not going to change that project frame rate because I've already set the frame rate in project settings earlier. So I'm going to say don't change. And you can see here, everything has been imported all in one. Now, you can actually create folders in Explorer outside of Davinci Resolve on your Windows machine or your Mac or otherwise, and have all of that come in. Bin is just a different name for a folder, but I don't have them organized that way, and I have that on purpose. The reason is that, as I said, I want to tell this sequentially. I want to make sure that every single shot in this is told from the moment that it was taken. And because we have a mishmash of files, we therefore need to make sure they're all in one spot to be able to pull that off. But just as an example, just so you know, you can right click at any point, anywhere, do a new bin, stuff, and then you can grab a whole bunch of files and you can dump them in there. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to get my footage and I'm going to pop back in here and delete that folder. All gone. So everything is all in one spot. Now, another really cool thing about Davinci is that everything is organized all in one application. Everything from dealing with your VFX through something like Fusion to audio in Fairlight. We're going to move along across each one of these tabs and I'll explain how they function. But the next tab along the way here is the Cut tab. Now, the Cut tab operates similar to Final Cut Pro, I believe. I've never used Final Cut Pro. I'm not a Mac user, but it's just another way of editing. I don't like it, so I'm not going to do it. What I am going to do is move over to the Edit tab, which is something that's a little bit more familiar for me, and I feel like it's probably a little bit more familiar to you as well. If you find that your files are not in the order that it was shot, you can have a bit of a play around with these different options here, date created, date modified, and so on. You can see that when it's come here and says date created, it's put all of my Canon R7 files, which are the ones that have IMG in front of them, all together, but that's not when they were taken. So by going up here and by changing it to date modified, I get everything in the order it was shot in. Now, the way that I'm going to do today is that I'm going to highlight everything and I'm going to dump it straight into the timeline because it's all in order. So from here, we can start playing around with our files. If you click on the file, you'll notice that these files are linked. In the event that they're not linked, it's probably because this button over here, link selection, is not on. So if you click on something, it's going to operate independently and move around independently on the timeline without the audio that goes with it or without the video that goes with it, depending on what you're doing. Turning on link selection means that when you finally do click, it all moves together. And most of the time, that's what you're going to want, but not always. Depends on your editing style. Now, is it time to edit? Perhaps. If you've come from another application, then heading up to Davinci Resolve and keyboard customization is probably where you want to go next. There are a series of different keyboard customization options from other applications that you may want to use. You could learn Davinci's, or you could end up making your own, as I have. I've called this one YouTube. I'm going to try and avoid using my shortcuts today, and I'm just going to use the individual tools as they exist just to show you. But just so you know, keyboard shortcuts make a massive difference in speeding up your workflow. But we're not about speed right now. What we're about is just making sure that we can edit. So here is my entire timeline. We can zoom in and out using the mouse here. That zooms all the way in, getting down to the nitty gritty. And all the way out, we can see the entire thing there. All of my footage goes up to, geez, quite a while there, 1 hour and 7 minutes. That's a nice final shot for you. We're now going to start editing this footage. So what I want to do is I want to focus on my first part of the timeline there, and I want to go ahead and zoom in so I can see it a little bit better. As you can see, the more that you zoom in, the more that you can actually see in the frames along the way there. You can make adjustments to what you see on the video timeline by going up here to this option here, the timeline view options, and then going through and changing it so you can change it to sort of a thumbnail view where you don't get all that extra bit of footage, a simple view that gets rid of it entirely, or a breakdown, a film strip view, and that's the one that I prefer. You can also make tweaks to the height, the track height. So if you want to make it a little bit bigger, you can, and obviously you can do the same for audio. Fine tune that as the project goes along based on your needs. So anyway, let's get back to this. I'm going to zoom in a touch more, and we're just going to watch this clip.
Where are we going, Mama?
We're going to the zoo.
Where are we going, Jade?
We're going to zoo.
Zoo!
And that clip ended there on a shot of my legs. So we'll be cutting that out, won't we? One thing that I'm going to quickly mention as well is if you're importing audio and it doesn't sound quite right, it sounds mono, it's only coming out of one ear or just doesn't sound quite right. If you right click and go to click attributes, then there you can see that there are different settings here. So there is a possibility that your audio is going to be set to mono only, embedded channel 1. To fix that, you just change it over to stereo and then make sure you've got embedded channel 1 and embedded channel 2, and that'll fix up your audio. So that's all fixed there. Now you will notice as well that when I'm clicking on each of these clips, like so, it's not selecting both of them. You could highlight both of them by clicking down, left click and dragging, like so. Alternatively, you could also have link selection turned on. To do that, you just go up here, click link selection, or Control-Shift-L on your keyboard if that's what it's set to, and that'll highlight both. You'll be turning this on and off as needed. One other thing you might notice is that the playhead here can get a little bit sticky, and that's really, really helpful if you're trying to line clips up. But if you want a bit more of a free-form view, then you simply turn off this snapping tool here. Undoing that means that when I'm going along, it just glides along like so. If I was to turn it back on and I move it across, you'll see that it sort of slots in place like so. It snaps. So turn that on and off as needed. You'll be doing that a lot. And the other big feature that you'll be using a lot, besides, of course, your selection mode, is the blade edit mode. It's A here for the selection mode and B for the blade edit mode. I'll be just clicking on it for today, not using the shortcut. And what we want to do is we want to edit out some of this footage. So
where are we going, Mama?
You can see there that my voice was prominent there in the waveform. That's why it's it looks so big on the waveform there. That's my voice because I'm closer to the camera. And I'm going to simply go ahead and chop that bit there.
Where we going, Mama?
We're going to the zoo.
Now from here, I want to capture my daughter's voice. So,
Where we going, Jade?
We're going to.
but what you'll notice is that when I start talking, my hand gets in the way there, right? I might want to fix that up a little bit. So I'm going to do a cut here.
Where we going, Jade?
We're going to zoo.
Now, because my hand is in that shot when I
Where we
say,
going, Jade?
I want to be able to isolate that. I want to get rid of that shot of my hand, but I still want to hear my voice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move over here and I'm going to cut out that bit of the clip. So we've got both the audio and the video cut because they are linked. I'm going to head back here to selection, and then I'm going to grab this and move it away. So it's now independent of the rest of the clip. And so we no longer want this bit of footage, but we want to keep the audio. So I'm going to right click on here and I'm going to go delete selected. But that leaves us with a gap. To fix that gap, you simply click on the gap, right click it and go ripple delete. But you could go one further. You could right click here and you could go ahead and do ripple delete. It gets rid of both the video and cleans up the gap. And this is a great time where you could create that as a shortcut, right? You could do a ripple delete on your shortcut, just do it all in one hit, press Z or something on your keyboard, and away it goes. So now what we're left with is...
Where we going, Jade?
Going to zoo.
And I might tidy that up a little bit more. So
The zoo.
my wife says going to the zoo. I crop this here. Hold on, let's link the clips again. And I right click and I do a ripple delete. It is very, very hard for me to not use keyboard shortcuts right now. So if I'm slipping up a little bit, I apologize. But anyway, this is what we're left with.
We're going to the zoo.
Where we going, Jade?
Going to zoo.
And then honestly, all I probably want from there is me saying zoo. So you can sort of see as I'm scrubbing along there, my lips are about to say zoo. I'm going to get a cut, put it here. I'm going to get a cut on this side and put it there. And as you can see, it's sticking as I go along. And that's because the magnet tool is on. If the magnet tool wasn't on, it would just glide around. So we've got the magnet tool there, called the magnet tool. It's a snapping tool. And then we go there like so. We change back to here. We highlight this. We right click and we say ripple delete. And then we're left with this.
Where we going, Jade?
Probably a little overzealous there on that cut. And then from here, I want to make sure that I can hear my daughter say we're going to the zoo.
Going to zoo.
So we're going to head back like so. We're going to cut this bit out here, change back to our selection tool, right click, do a ripple delete, and then have another listen.
Going to the zoo.
Where we going, Jade?
Going to zoo.
And that's a good time to end it, I think. So we're going to get the cut tool again. We're going to jump back here to the selection tool, highlight this, right click, and ripple delete. You can see where those shortcuts come in handy. So we're left with a nice clip end to
Where we
end.
going, Mama?
We're going to the zoo.
Where we going, Jade?
Going to zoo.
You know what? We can even get rid of that bit at the beginning there. Right click, ripple delete.
Where we going, Mama?
We're going to the zoo.
Where we going, Jade?
Going to zoo.
And that's one clip. Now, obviously, as you become more experienced, you're going to be able to go ahead and, make edits a lot faster than that. But that's kind of what we're looking at there. So that's a whole section there edited. Now, before we continue to edit this video, I want to tidy a few things up. So first of all, I don't need access to this anymore, right? So I'm going to click up here and turn off our media pool. You could leave it on. You can even expand it if you so choose by pressing the corresponding buttons. You can tighten things up a fair bit, but I don't want them on at all. So I'm going to turn that off, and that gives me a little bit more screen real estate. On the right-hand side, however, we have something called the inspector. And what that does is that deals with each individual clip, like so, and all of their individual settings. Now, something that I might want to do here, which is a fantastic feature in the studio version of this application, is that I might want to isolate the voice a little bit more. So by doing that, I'm basically clicking on the entire clip. I could just click on the audio itself if I wanted to, but I'm clicking on the entire clip. I'm going to audio, and then I'm going to isolate my voice. Let's just have one more listen to what it sounds like without voice isolation.
Where we going, Mama?
We're going to the zoo.
And now if I turn voice isolation on,
Where we going, Mama?
We're going to the zoo.
so you heard that, right? You heard that before there was a lot of background noise from the car.
Where we going, Mama?
We're going to the zoo.
With voice isolation on,
Where we going, Mama?
Now you can adjust the amount of voice isolation as you see fit. For the purposes of this video, I want a bit of the background noise. We want to hear the noise from the car. If I was to put music as part of the track, then that would be a different story altogether. I might just want to hear the voices. I might want to amplify them in a different way. Because my wife was not mic'd up when I was taking this footage, she's obviously going to sound more distant. But there are clips where something like voice isolation are better used, especially sort of talking head stuff like I'm doing right now. And in fact, when I edit this video, I will be very likely using voice isolation. The reason for that is that where I am at the moment is very, very echoey, and I'm off a busy street, a main road. You hear cars and sirens and all sorts of stuff. So keep that voice isolation option in mind. In this next clip, I'm talking about the weather.
It was very, very hot. Today's quite overcast.
Not particularly interesting. You can see that it's overcast. You don't need that footage. So what we're going to do is going to highlight both. I want to get rid of the audio. I'm going to unlink, deselect, select again. We're going to get just rid of the audio, and I'm going to right click there, and we're going to do delete selected. We don't want to do a ripple delete, because if we were to do a ripple delete, like so, it would get rid of the video as well. Even though they're not linked, it's getting rid of that whole section. So just press Control-Z there to go back. I have to use some shortcuts, I'm sorry. But if you wanted to undo what you were doing, you can go up to the Edit tab here, Undo and Redo. And then I just want to get rid of the audio. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete the selected clip. And now we're left with a really, really long sequence of a drive. That's boring, isn't it? You don't want to see that. So instead, what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to, well, first of all, I'm going to shorten it a little bit. So to do that, you go on either side. So what we're doing here is that I can simply shorten the clip by going to the furthest point on the left and dragging it to one side. And then I can do the same. If I go all the way to the right there, I can drag that along like so. And we can end it there. So there you go. But obviously now we're left with those gaps. You know what to do. Say it with me. We ripple delete. Now, what just happened? Over here on the right-hand side, you'll notice that there is a timestamp. And basically the audio and the video to the right of the playhead, they aren't synced up anymore. And the reason for that is because the footage wasn't linked. So if we now go and undo what I just did, the reason, again, as I said, is because it isn't linked. I need to turn on the link feature, which means that the audio and the video are together. And then when I go and I ripple delete, it sticks together. So if you ever see that, that's the reason why you had it unlinked and then you move things around. Sometimes you do that by choice, but that little message is there to warn you that things are out of sync. We can fix that later, but it's better to do that now. So now we're left with this, but it's still not particularly interesting. Let's speed that bad boy up. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click. We're going to go to change clip speed. We're currently at 100% with 7 seconds of driving. And we want to change that. Let's change it to 1,000. Why not? We'll see what happens. So we've changed that, and what that's done is it's cropped it down to this. Now, I'll probably go back and edit that a little bit. I might make some changes, but ultimately we're left with very, very quick, zoomy footage. So that's how you speed things up. And then you can in turn slow things down. When you're working with a 60 frames per second timeline, then you've got a bit more versatility there. So we're going to go ahead and ripple delete, and we're with the next clip. So basically what I'm going to do from there is I'm going to end up making a compilation of the driving sequence. There'll be a bit of music going on there, and then we get to our destination. One other handy tip, if you're listening back and things are quite loud, but you still want to listen to it, it's quite loud at the moment for me, is I can hit this dim option here, and that reduces the audio quite a lot to a point that you can still hear it, but it's not as annoying. So that's a handy tip for you. Another tip is, as you'll see along here, this footage is done at 60 frames per second, 59.94, and you can see the frame rate up there. It's nice and steady. But occasionally what happens is that your footage ends up being choppy. And this is usually due to the fact that your computer might not be fast enough, or the files that you're working with are really, really massive. There are a variety of different reasons as to why that would happen. The Osmo Pocket 3's footage, the one that I'm filming on right now, has a tendency of doing this. So one thing that you can do is you can work with proxies. Now we set up the way that proxies functioned earlier. To be able to create proxy footage, there are a number of different ways of doing it. You might want to do it for every single clip on your timeline, or alternatively, just some longer, larger clips that have issues. I'm going to do it for an individual clip right now just to show you how it functions, but it is possible to do all of this in the Media tab at the very, very start of you working on your video. So to create a proxy just for this individual clip, I'm going to right-click on the clip and go find in media pool. That'll open up the media pool section up the top there, and it's highlighted it like so. You can see that it's got this orange border around it. We can scrub through like it is, and then we can right click on that particular bit of footage and we can generate proxy media. The moment that you do that, it will start working on creating a more timeline friendly version of your file. As I said, I don't need to do this. The timeline seems to be holding strong with that RTX 4060 in there, but you may find that beneficial. You just have to wait it out. If you're working with as many files as I am right now and you try and generate proxy media for all of them at the very start, it's going to take a long time, but it might also alleviate some of the frustration of working with a slow timeline. So if your timeline is slow, proxy media is the way to go. And now what you'll notice here in the bottom left of that clip is it says PXY. That means proxy. In the top right-hand corner up here, we have prefer proxies turned on. So that's what you want turned on. You want prefer proxies turned on if at any point you are working with proxies. This will run just as smooth as it was before, but at a reduced resolution. And you can reduce the resolution even further than that by going up to the top here and going to playback and then timeline proxy resolution. So they're your first sort of set of steps, right? You create your proxy first, then you can change the proxy resolution. Again, it's reduced the quality further. This is not what's going to happen in your final product. It's just for this section, just for working in the timeline. Your video will not look like this when you export. It'll be that nice crisp 4K or 1080p that you filmed in. Now, one other thing that you can do to be able to optimize your media further is use a render cache. I'll show you how that functions. Go up to playback here and go to render cache and set it to smart. There's another option called user. We're just going to use smart for today. And what that will do is that you'll see that it's creating a little blue line here. And there are all these red lines over here. So anywhere that there's a red line, there's the potential for the footage to be choppy or have problems. And as it goes along on the timeline, you'll see that that red line changes into a blue line. And what that means is that when you finally do hit the blue section again, everything will operate smoother still. If you do make any changes to the file, you'll have to re-render every single time. And the way to do that is to simply play the clip, let it run. There is no benefit at the beginning to be able to turn on your render cache and then let the entire video play out, because you're going to make edits as you go along and it's going to get rid of those red lines. Alrighty, back to this section of the footage. So here we have this absolutely beautiful seal. I've taken this on the Pixel 8 Pro. You can see down the bottom there it says PXL, but I've also taken similar footage over here on my big boy camera, the Canon R7. Maybe I want to have two different camera angles, right? Maybe I want to mix it up a little bit. So to do that, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select the next bit of footage along the way. I am going to remove the sound. I don't want it, so I'm going to unlink. Click here, right click. I'm going to delete the selected, and then I can simply left click and drag and drop onto the top here. And what that means is that as we're going along, like so, it's going to cut to the footage that I've taken on the top. And that's just something creative that you can do. You can do that with your B-roll or otherwise. It's something a little creative that you can do to, change up your angles and things like that on your clip. Now, our Californian sea lion Murphy is about to jump in the water over here, and we're quite far away. We would like to probably see that a little closer up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and crop that little bit out there, right? So I'm going to use my razor tool there, cut here, slide this along a little to the right there. You can sort of see Murphy moving around there. He's jumped into the water, and then I'm probably going to crop maybe here. Ideally, I would have had linking turned on, and I would have gone ahead and done the same with the audio. So I'm going to switch linking back on down there, but as you can see, I can just use that razor tool again. There is a shortcut to be able to do the entire clip, which is Shift, and that'll do both, but again, we're not using shortcuts for today. So now we've got our cut clip here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can see what I'm working with, and I want to zoom in on him. I want to see what's going on. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to go up to the inspector again. If this is not here, it's just the button that says inspector, like so. And then I'm going to zoom all the way in, and that's a bit of a better angle, but we're not quite there. So we're going to start now playing around with our X and our Y here to get a bit more of a better shot. So let's go back to the beginning there. And if for some reason you're not happy with that, obviously you can move it around. You can also hit this little reset button here, and that will move the clip back to where it was at the start. There is another way of being able to do a zoom in, and that is using the transform tool, like so. So I'm clicking this over here, the transform tool, and then we can go ahead and drag this out. And if you prefer to work that way, you can. You can then hold down the left click and move around so that it is in a more suitable position for you. Now, here is something super cool for those of you that have the studio version. What we can do is we can zoom in once more on our friend Murphy there, Murph, and go down to Smart Reframe. From there, we can go and create a reference point and place it over Murph, like so. Might tighten that up just a touch more there in the center. And then I go ahead and I hit reframe. What that does is it creates keyframes for you. So now if I was to play this footage, it's going to follow Murph. I'm not doing this, I haven't done anything. It's all the smarts. And there you go, it follows him. You can do this yourself by creating your own keyframes, but the smart reframe option is, it makes it easier. That's all it comes down to. And that's the thing with a lot of the features in the Studio Edition. It makes things easier. There is definitely a speed increase, but it just has some extra tools there to be able to help you along. Totally worth it as far as I'm concerned. Now, zooming in and out on static shots is something that YouTubers often do. It just sort of makes the footage a little bit more interesting to view, especially if you're remaining still. Now, typically in other video editing programs, you use keyframes to be able to pull that off. Today, we're going to be using a feature called dynamic zoom. And the way that works is effectively, it adds the keyframes for you. So as you can see right now, she's talking, I'm not doing anything, and it's slowly zooming in on her. I'm remaining still. I haven't done anything, but it's zooming in on her, and then you can see it cuts back like so. You can go ahead and reverse that. So right now it's set to ease out. I can actually set it to ease in. So then it is the reverse. It will slowly move away from her. This works really well with shots that are taken with a gimbal or on a tripod where there isn't really any camera shake at all. It's a lot more obvious there. But that is something that you can do to be able to mix up those still shots. Now I'm going to quickly show you the Fusion tab. We're not going to do anything in Fusion today because these steps are a little bit more advanced, and again, this really would warrant another video. Also, truth be told, I'm not skilled enough at Fusion. There's a million other videos out there that would be better than this one. But Fusion is essentially where you go to be able to create effects, but it's not the only place that you do that. So what we do is we can head up to the effects tab there, and if you want to expand that section you can, or you can shrink it like so. And we have a whole bunch of different options here for like video transitions and audio transitions and so on. There's a lot of also like fun VFX type things that you can do. So under the open effects section here, we have a whole series of different filters and stuff like that that are available to us. Too many to show you today. You can actually kind of see what happens when you use some of these features. So like, as you can see here, it's turn on a camera shake, or, you know, something like adding scan lines. I don't know when you would do that, but you might want to do it. One other really cool section is the effects tab in the toolbox here. So what's something fun we could do here? Well, what we could do is we could add, I don't know, a binoculars effect. So what I can do is I can see what it would look like with binoculars, like so. So you can see there I'm scrubbing along. And so to add that effect, I simply left click on it, drag it down, pop it on top there. And as you can see here, we've got a binoculars effect. Now this is causing the timeline to chug. You can see up here that the frame rate there is now hit 42. It's not the smooth 60 frames a second. The audio gets a little bit distorted, and that's because my PC is struggling there with that effect. The fans are ramping up right now. So what I can do to alleviate that stress is go to the render cache, turn on smart render caching, press play, and let it go through like so. You can see that those blue lines there are being created, and that's essentially caching the entire file, which means that then when I go to play it back again later, it will be smooth. And now we have more stable 60 frames per second with the VFX included. I want to show you some other cool transitions. This is fairly common when you're moving from one clip to another and you just want to spice things up a little bit. We're going to go back to our earlier clip before where I said zoom, and then it cuts to a scene where we're driving in a car. To make that a touch more interesting, we can do a video transition. That's in the effects tab, same as before. And you can do very, very simple things. So to be able to see what's going on here, we'll move over to this section here. You've got something like this, like a cross dissolve. So again, you can view all of these VFX just by moving along there and see what that would look like without actually committing to putting the transition on there. But there's lots of other interesting ones. Now, not all of these are going to be available in the free version. And if it's not, when you highlight over it, it will tell you that it's not available in the free version. You need Studio for it. But a good chunk of them are, and that's really impressive. So there's all sorts of interesting ones here, like a mosaic kind of effect that transitions over here, panning to the right, like so, or even to the left, which probably Makes a little bit more sense. What else do we have? Just a standard sort of zoom in. You can do a zoom in and out again. And then super advanced stuff like, burning away like that. Let's throw the burn away on there. Now, the way that this works is that basically it's the same as what you did before. So you just left click, go down to the clip, place it there like so, and then burn away. All done. You can undo that. Transition, that's fun. Play around with those. If you want to get some tracks, here's a tip for you. Simply Google YouTube music library, and it'll take you to a free YouTube audio library that is curated by YouTube. And then from there, you just essentially go in and pick a track. There are some rules around how you're able to use it, but for the most part, they are free to use. You won't get hit with a copyright strike. So you just go ahead and find a song. You can go ahead and listen to that if you like. It's loud. Camptown Races it is. So we just go ahead and download that. So now that we've downloaded that, we then want to incorporate it onto our timeline. You can go ahead and create a bin for your music if you want to, or you can just simply drag and drop it in from wherever you've downloaded it to. As you can see, I'm just going to go ahead and drop that in, and that's going to pop straight onto Audio 3. Now, there is a lot that we can do within Fairlight. One of the main components of it is adding things like compressors and limiters. From there, you can tweak things like your dynamics. If you double click on the dynamics box for A1, which is the same as our vocal tracks, from there you can see that we have compressor and limiter. We're not going to get into that too much today, but they are some powerful tools to really be able to elevate your audio. Another component is to add effects to your track. The same thing, you pick the corresponding track, you press the little plus button, and then you've got all sorts of options here. Restoration is particularly good. You've got your DSE, your dehummer, and your noise reduction as well, which goes a little bit further. Another thing to look out for is your LUFS. What is LUFS? LUFS stands for Loudness Units Full Scale, and YouTube has its own standard. It's -14. One little trick to get Davinci to handle that for you is to select your audio. I'm just selecting a few tracks here. Right click, go to Normalize Audio Levels, and select YouTube as your normalization mode. That puts in a target level and a target loudness. Relative will mean that it matches its peak loudness for all the clips that you've selected, whereas independent will do it individually. There are other standards as well. So for example, if you were to deliver this content to Netflix or Disney, they have their own standards in turn. For example, Disney's is -24. If we head back to YouTube now and hit normalize independently, it will make those adjustments. And there is a tool up here that will measure that loudness for you, but we won't get into that today. You can also access a lot of these audio effects by just using the effects button up the top here. You've got dehummer and echo and flanger and all sorts of fun stuff to play around with. You can also deal with your audio transitions there, all of your crossfades. It's up to you as to whether or not you want to edit your audio in Fairlight that has more tools available, or if you just want to keep it simple and stick with the edit page. Both work, and I think when you're starting out, the edit page is enough. But have a play around in Fairlight when you're starting to feel a little bit more confident. When you are playing around with music tracks, make sure that your music doesn't overpower your vocals. There is a feature called audio ducking that exists within the Fairlight page that might be worth looking into, but I prefer to do that manually. One other feature that's available in the studio version is audio transcription. I'll show you quickly how that works. So simply go ahead and right click on a clip. I'll find one where somebody's actually doing some talking, and let's have a look. Here we go. And then from there, once it's highlighted, head up to the audio or the transcribe audio button. Once it is finished transcribing that audio, it will give you, to the best of its ability, a script. And that allows you to be able to do things like create subtitles or be able to detect things like silences in your video. From there, you can remove those silences to make the video more engaging. Now that that's completed, we can see the audio transcription there. We can even click around to where my wife says those respective words. Let's have a listen. The cool thing about the transcription is it helps you identify sections where there are silence, which is indicated by these 3 dots here. You can also go ahead and check out when you might say too many times.
But yeah, you've got like a nice smart TV.
Makes editing a little bit easier. It's very hard not to say when you're making a YouTube video, or in general, really. We're now going to quickly jump across to the color tab. Davinci is very good for editing color. I'm not very good at editing color, but I just want to quickly show you some interesting features that work here. One amazing feature of the color tool is remote grading. So for example, I have one clip here that has been cut up with the blade tool. And right now, if I was to make any changes at all to the color or white balance or anything like that, you can see that it only is applying to that one clip. So I've gone ahead and made a change there, but here in this next section, nothing. I can then go back. You can actually see it changing down here as well. What I can do is I can right click on this clip and go copy local grades to remote. You'll see there's a little icon here that indicates that that's all part of the same clip. Then when I go ahead and I'm making change in any of them, it applies to all of them. There is also an auto balance field. If you don't want to do the color grading yourself, you simply go down here to the auto balance button and it makes the changes. If you want to undo everything that you've done, you simply go up to one of the nodes up here, right click and hit reset node, and that will revert your color back to the way that it was before. Again, something like this really warrants a different video and probably not a video from me. But I am still very much learning and I'm looking forward to learning more about color grading in Davinci. I am now going to jump over to the Cut tab. So as mentioned earlier, the Cut tab is basically just another timeline. All of the edits that we've gone ahead and made in the video so far are all present within the Cut tab. It's just a different way of editing, really, and I am not particularly familiar with using the Cut tab. If you do use the Cut tab or you do find it useful, can you please let me know in the comments, because I'm interested to see how it helps with your workflow. But yes, just to confirm, the Cut tab and the Edit tab share the same footage. Another super handy feature is creating a new timeline. To do that, you go up the top here and you go to File and then New Timeline. We've created a second timeline now that you can see here. And you can jump between the two timelines by going to timeline 1 and timeline 2, or whatever you've named it. I often use a second timeline for organizational reasons. I want to get a whole series of clips, pop them onto a second timeline and work with them there without messing with the original timeline. You can also stack those timelines. So over here, we have the timeline view options and stack timelines. You then press this little plus over on the right-hand side like so, and then you can drop down and select your second timeline. From there, you can grab footage like so, and they even operate independently of one another. I'll just go ahead and ripple delete on that one. You can copy stuff from one timeline to another timeline. So for example, I can just drag and drop up like so, and that will appear there as well. I do this a lot for my gaming videos where I'm using footage from a previous video that I've done as B-roll. It's really handy. If you're interested in seeing how I put together gaming videos, let me know in the comments. Now, obviously, I have a fair bit more editing to do, but I'm just going to quickly show you the deliver page. This is where we adjust all the presets for the deliverable. So up the top here, you can see that there are a series of different options. If you are making something for YouTube, you can go ahead and select the YouTube option, go to the drop-down section, and go and change it to something like 2160p if you're working with 4K files. I find that this export option heavily compresses the video, and so you are better off creating a custom file. So for this, we're going to head over to Custom Export. Now, I do need to warn you that the file size that you're going to end up with is going to be significantly larger than if you were to use the YouTube option. But YouTube heavily compresses anything that you create. So you want to make sure that you have something with a higher bitrate. These are the options that I go with. There are variants on this, but this has often worked for me. So obviously, you're going to give your file a name and a location to save it in. I then go from there to MP4. I change that to H265 for efficiency. I make sure that it's set to 4K and 60 frames, and I restrict the quality to 100,000. So that is quite a high bit rate, but for 4K 60, that is a suitable bit rate to go to. You would make adjustments, you would reduce the bit rate if you were working with 1080p footage. And then from there, it's just a case of going add to render queue. And that's it. Davinci Resolve is an incredible piece of software, and I am not going back to any of the alternatives. It is fast, it is reliable, and most importantly, there is no subscription. I'm a big fan of Blackmagic's business model, and I'm incredibly grateful that they were willing to support a small creator like myself. If you do have any questions about Davinci Resolve or anything that I've talked about today, please let me know in the comments. Please also be aware that I am definitely not an expert, but I will do my best to help you. And I can also redirect you to some other amazing videos from some brilliant content creators who can guide you on your editing journey. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.